always been a programmer more than a musician. I knew music theory, I can read music. I made this decision very early on because you can do one thing well, and I decided to become a programmer. My mission was always, it has to be easy on the mind when you make music, because inspiration is something fluid. It's gone easily. I started to develop our own framework, and I spent 2 years working from home at that point. That's how Nuendo started. I'm free. I sold my company shares at PreSonus last year, achieved what I always wanted, and freedom.
Hi everybody, this is Ray Williams. Today we're coming to you from our studios here in Toronto, and we have with us one of the most celebrated and talented and certainly most significant programmers in our industry, Mr. Wolfgang Kundrus, who is in Germany. How are you doing, Wolfgang?
Oh, I'm good. Thank you for this wonderful introduction.
Wolfgang, I have to be honest and say Wolfgang and I go back a long ways.
Yes.
So I do know him quite well. So it's going to be fun to interview him. And I'm going to have to pretend to be surprised at some of the things he says, but I am sure I will also be surprised by some of the things he says, because he's always been a very candid person with me. So Wolfgang, if you could just tell us a little bit about your early days and growing up in Germany, and maybe how you accessed music as a child, or did you?
My early life was a bit upside down. I married very early. My first girlfriend got pregnant when she was 18 and I was 18. So we decided to have a kid. Of course, that didn't work out. So my life was in pieces. And so I went to the German Air Force, actually to become a helicopter pilot, which didn't work out either. So I ended up in air traffic control, and that gave me an English course, which was 9 months full-time. So I learned the English language very well, and that was very important later on. I grew up in a big family with 5 sisters. My father was a worker at a company that built cranes, like metalwork. My mother was a housewife. Both of my parents were heavily impacted by the war. My father was in custody, military in Russia, near St. Petersburg. He got thrown into this when he was 16. And he came back when he was 24, has lost his youth. My mother has lost her mother because her mother ended up in the psychiatric hospital, and the Nazis killed her. She was killed in this euthanasia program. And my mother grew up with foster parents, because her father gave her away. And to their, given with this background, this injuries in the soul, they've done a good job of raising 6 kids. And but I grew up in an environment that I never felt part of. Somehow, I had this, at least it was diagnosed, this exceptional intelligence. And so I wanted to get out of that. And it was a mission all my life. Get away from this life. And I achieved that. And I managed to work myself out of it. And from a very poor family to someone who doesn't have to work anymore.
Which part of Germany was this you grew up in? Which side?
It was Hamburg. It's the third largest city in Germany. It's a very world open city. There's a very large harbor, and it's a liberal city. It's a free city, and it was a good place to grow up. A lot of influence.
Now there was a lot of music in Hamburg as well. I mean, wasn't that a place where the Beatles played?
Yes, that was St. Pauli Star Club, where that happened. That's true.
And was there a big music scene in Hamburg at the time?
At that time, I wasn't connected to that world, to be honest. I always enjoyed music. It was very important for me always listen to music, but not become active. That was very late. So yes, there's a large music scene in Hamburg, but
now you've got the first synthesizer or the first keyboard, and you've seen this MIDI connection, but you're still a juggler. And where are you going juggling? Where is that happening? All over Germany?
No, just local in Hamburg. Just street festivals in the city, basically.
And I gotta ask, how many balls? How far did you go as a juggler?
4 clubs, 5 balls. Yeah. And that came to an end when I got an accident with my knee. So I couldn't move very well. And so that my interest shifted to music, to playing the synthesizer.
So were you making music yourself?
I've always been a programmer more than a musician. I knew music very well. I knew music theory. I can read music. I don't play music very well because I made this decision very early on because it's clear. First, it was late for me to become a great musician, and you can do one thing well, and I decided to become a programmer and do that. But I always got an opportunity to do music in the late stages when I had to test the programs I was working on.
So what's the first piece of music-related software that you encountered, or were there any?
The first music computer was the Yamaha. What was this?
CBX D5.
Yeah, right, exactly. And that was very limited.
No. The CBX D5 was the big white thing. No, what was it called?
CM5, something like.
Or CX5M? Was it CX5M?
Yeah. So one of these, one of this very early music computer from Yamaha. It had a custom software, and it had an FM chip in it, and it had limited sound capabilities. And you couldn't program it. It was a closed system. So when I decided to take this on as a profession, I bought an Atari computer. I had a friend who gave me a loan. It was pretty expensive, 2,500 German marks at that time, maybe $2,000 or so. It was a lot of money for me at that time. And I started with that. And then the first piece of software I bought actually was a Pro 24. And one of the things that triggered this interest was an article in Keyboard magazine, in the German Keyboard magazine. And it was explicit about how great the Atari is, with the high resolution screen, with the mouse, and now everything becomes easy to use. And then I got Pro 24. And that was a complete failure. It took me like 2 weeks to understand only a little bit of it. And I never really fully understood it. And so I knew that could be different. So at least there my mission was born.
I remember that software, and I am with you on that one. I could not, for the life of me, figure out how to really use it. They had all the tracks along the top, and I just didn't get it. And by the way, it was the Yamaha CX5M computer. That was the name of it. CX5M. Yeah. So you're in Hamburg, and this Pro 24 software is actually also being made in Hamburg, correct?
Right. That was a Steinberg product, and it was made by Werner Kracht, who was one of the programmers associated with Steinberg at that time. The programmers were loosely related. They weren't employees. They worked on the base of revenue share. And so that's when I did that, the Atari came out. Charlie was busy with his C64 program. He didn't have any bandwidth, and everybody else was tied up somehow. And then Werner got the Atari, and then he started writing this program. That's how I remember that.
How do you know all of this? Because you didn't really explain how you would know Werner and how you would know. How did you meet the people that wrote the Pro 24 software?
Okay, after I had this stroke of light that music software will be my profession now, that was the point. I started studying anthropology just to be able to receive support from the government. And so it was perfect timing when this came about. So I made this decision. This will be my profession now. That was the time when I bought the Atari and a book about programming and a compiler on the black market. I started to write an editor for my synthesizer, the Bit 99. And after like 5 or 6 months, I was far enough and confident enough to approach C-Lab and Steinberg. So I made an appointment with both companies. The first one was with C-Lab. Apparently, the guy I had the appointment with wasn't there. He missed it somehow, and nobody else was there that could do anything with me at that point. So I went on, and the next day I had a meeting with Charlie and Manfred, and that was a very good meeting. So we basically exchanged ideas, and so my idea was from the very beginning that this has to be very easy to use. You have to understand this easily. You don't have to be a technical mind to use this. And so that's an idea that I presented. And so, okay, then we made a deal. I got a job. Meanwhile, I started studying computer science, and so I took this job with Steinberg as a side job to support myself, and that was like 6 months when I decided, okay, I don't learn what I need for this job at this university. I'm gonna start working full-time with Steinberg. That was like March 1987. Yeah, that's where I started to work full-time.
Now at this time, just to give people an idea of what you're working with, at this time, the Atari 1040 and 520 are out.
Yes.
You have the IBM PC. You have some very small Macintoshes, maybe the Macintosh 512 or 128. What kind of programming language were you guys? Yeah, Spectrum. What kind of programming language were you guys working in those days?
C and assembler. C is a high-level language, and assembler is actually machine instructions, one by one.
And what were some of the biggest challenges? I mean, looking back on it now, what were some of the big challenges of developing in that time, the late 80s?
That's if you look back, like from the perspective now, I just don't comprehend how we were able to do that. Things were a lot smaller. The Atari had 1 megabyte of main memory. The first thing I got when I joined Steinberg was a hard drive with 20 megabyte space on it. So the programs were a lot smaller, and they did amazingly much for that, but these were constraints, and the turnaround times were a lot longer. Like you waited minutes to see what you just typed in, see it working. Very limited, but still, it did not feel that much different to now. It's just that the tools are better now, the language has evolved. We're able to manage much more complex structures and much better user convenience, but spirit is the same, I'd say. In my early life, like when I was 16 to 18, I was with a German telecom, and I learned to be a telecom worker, basically, installing telephone systems, and but also at that time the telephone systems used relay, which were small electromagnetic switches, which is definitely precursors of computer logic later on. And I had a very solid education about fundamentals of electricity, how transistors work, electronics, and how to debug relay systems. Like you had a box like this with like 200 relays in there, and there is an error somewhere. It doesn't do what it's supposed to do. And now it's your job to find out where's the error. So, and that's where I learned debugging, actually, excluding courses one by one until you were there. So I was prepared for this thing, but in a different way. But still.
As you start working at Steinberg, could you describe where you guys were and who were you working with on a daily basis?
So this building was an old warehouse building, and we basically had 2 floors. First floor was marketing. Manfred was there, and his personal assistant, and some programmers. And then there was a rooftop, basically, a large room. And that's where we started working on Cubase. When I was there was Charlie, there was Werner, Manfred was there, of course. Then I don't know if Valerie was there already. It might be. Some people printed manuals with photocopiers and put them into ring binders and produced the software, the products that were shipped out. And so they were there. And the company had maybe 7 people, 8 people.
But as far as programmers, it was just you, Lena, and Charlie at that time.
Right. There was a guy who worked with Waldorf, actually, shared offices, Chris Mercer. He did the score editor in Pro24. So, okay, I joined in spring, and pretty soon the plan was presented that we're going to write a new sequencer now. And the change will be, we do it as a team, because we cannot do this like it's been before, one man, one program. That won't work. So we created a team, and the team was Werner, Chris Mercer, Stefan Scheffler, who came to us from school, and me. And there was the Cubase team. Charlie was there, and Charlie was the one with the low-level knowledge. He knew about interrupts, timers, input, output, the chips that you need to program to get media in out. Charlie had that knowledge, and he wanted to put that in a form that it's can be used like an operating system component. The name was Emros at that time, and Emros was the foundation, the very low level foundation of Cubase. That was Charlie's contribution at that point, which was very important, and he did a very good job with it. Werner, he was the one who could turn musical concepts into code. He was a musician, he's a very good guitar player, and he had done things in Pro24 that hasn't been done before. And the big shift was from a very limited memory, like 64K in the C64, to 1 megabyte of RAM. So suddenly you could record like endless MIDI. And Pro24 already had an internal structure that was like what you see today in the arrange window. It was already parts that you could move around. And so that was Werner's part. Werner wrote the new engine, the sequencer engine. And I did the user interface together with Stefan. I did the arrange window, and Stefan did the piano roll editor. So we already had an idea what we want to do, and my intention very early on was to bring it to the Macintosh. It was even before we started. I had the Mac Plus on my desk, and I had these 3 books, the developer documentation from Apple. And one of the books, a large part was user interface guidelines. And it wasn't just instructions, what you put where, but also what you have to do for it to be easily comprehended for the user. So that was a very important influence for me. And that's when you look at the first version of Cubase and you look at the very early Macintosh programs, you will see the similarities. So my mission was always, it has to be easy on the mind when you make music, because inspiration is something fluid. It's gone easily, like you have this brilliant melody, and then you start thinking, what do I have to do? Oh, the sequencer. Now let me check this, and then you get back to recording. Oh, where's this melody?
Right. Now, I got to tell you, I got to confess that I have to confess that when I first saw the Cubase interface, it immediately synchronized with the way my brain worked. Where did you get the idea of the parts, the boxes? Where did that come from?
That was my invention. It was, we had a Swedish distributor, and unfortunately I forgot his name.
Fitzpatrick.
Greg Fitzpatrick. There you go. Thank you. And Greg had scribbled an idea how to visualize the MIDI parts in Pro24. And it was explained to me how this could look like. I think Werner did that to a large part. And Manfred later on, when it was already implemented, showed me this scribble. There was another program, Master Tracks Pro. It had some of the elements that Cubase had already. It had a timeline, and it had a piano roll editor. It had the Macintosh user interface guidelines implemented. I think it came from the Mac. But the difference was that Mastertracks Pro had only blocks on the timeline that were filled where there was MIDI data. It wasn't this thing, here's my musical phrase, I touch it and I move it. So that was what we did. And what's my contribution now? Okay, there was the engine, there was the basic concept, and my contribution was taking the Macintosh user interface guidelines, conventions that come from graphics software, Mac Drawer Plus, and use that tool set to edit music.
And I remember Mastertrack Pro, and the big failing of the Mastertrack Pro system was, regardless of where the zoom out level was, if there was just one note, it'll fill the block. So there was no way to see, relatively speaking, how much data was in each block versus another block, if it's just filled or not filled. So that's where Cubase, I think, and you know, congratulations to the millions and millions of people that have used that system, Wolfgang. I'm representing them right here, and I really got to say that thank you for that. Honestly, this was a revolutionary way of arranging and creating.
My pleasure.
Now, do you ever reflect? Do you ever reflect on you know what that simple contribution has meant for a lot of musical people? I'm not talking about big professional folks, but people are working on music in their bedroom. Do you ever stop and think about that, the impact of that one development? Because so many other people have implemented that system.
No, I don't. And actually, yes, I had a major part in it. But it wasn't as big as some people make it. I think it is. It was a team effort. It was a joint effort, taking in ideas, reflecting collectively, trying things out. And of course, I had my mission, and I know that the approach, usability, was very important, and which also later on became important again. And I know that this is for people who use it, the biggest gift I can give as a developer, make it easy on the mind. So you don't have a high barrier of entry. There's always a new mission.
Right, but yeah, I gotta say it was phenomenal. Now there's one other thing that came out of that same paradigm shift of Cubase, and that was the Toolbox, where you had a mouse pointer, you had an eraser, you had the scissors. Where did that idea come from?
That came from the graphic software. If you look at how graphic software works, you always have some mouse tools. And so we applied that idea. I think, and then the tools just came up what you need, like resize, erase, split. So you could do things. It was point and click graphically.
You being in Germany and speaking German, sleeping in German, dreaming in German, I could imagine that, you know, having more iconic features of your interface would also help with the language barrier, because right around Germany, how many different languages were there? Did you see this was that a factor, that the fact that you were trying to sort of iconize your GUI interface to mitigate issues with calling something CUT or using English terms? Did you ever think about that impact, the impact that the Toolbox would have in terms of linguistic acceptance of Cubase? No matter where you were, you can kind of operate with the interface and these tools?
No, that was unintentional. It was just, we wanted direct manipulation of music. You have the parts, your phrases on the arrangement, and you point and click, and then you select, you issue commands like delete, cut, copy, paste, undo. So there was a system of editing objects visually that was implemented in graphics software. And we used the same paradigms. That's where the mouse tools come from. The point and click, select, just direct manipulation, resizing, moving things around. They all work pretty much like Mac Pro.
Now you have Cubase with a very, very specific, I would say very cutting edge GUI. Also in Hamburg, you have another program called Notator. At that time, that program was working more like in patterns, like a drum machine style. Was there any consideration given at Steinberg to maybe implementing some elements of the sort of pattern song mode kind of structure for arranging music?
No, we knew that this approach is far superior. And I mean, Notator, Creator, they were, how you say, contemporaries of Pro 24, same generation, first generation Atari programs. And then we came out with Cubase, and then their talk was, oh, this is just an inferior approach. Ours is much better. And because of this and this and this. And then 2 years later, there was Logic. Suddenly looked like Cubase, worked like Cubase. We never thought we need to do something else. We focused on this, and it just comes natural when you work on the computer using these paradigms. And so nowadays all the programs work like this. Some variation.
Let's zoom forward a little bit to around the mid-90s, 1996. You're starting to see a lot of digital audio being added, because before this, most of the sequencers were MIDI. And how did that discussion evolve inside of Steinberg to try to work with audio? How did that start happening?
There were two developments that went on in parallel. I mean, audio in Cubase started with DigiDesigner hardware. They had an engine, and with this engine we could do hard disk recording in the software. And that was fairly early. It was on the Mac primarily. It required a very fast Macintosh computer, but it allowed the integration of audio and MIDI in one user interface, in one arrangement. In the same song, move around the lyrics like you can move around the keyboard parts. That was going on, and we weren't happy with how it developed. The whole program came to a point where it was hard to maintain. We had a lot of problems during that time, and stability was an issue. And on the other hand, Logic came out, the new kids on the block, the freshest code, and so we had this full plenum, everybody involved in Steinberg, distributor was there, Wolfgang Kundrus, and they presented the idea, we have to write something new. We have to start fresh. So that was this plan, and it had some bumpy developments. And on the other hand, the Atari Falcon came out. The Atari Falcon had a DSP on board, and with the DSP and a fast hard drive, it was possible to do audio natively. I think that's when Charlie really came back into the center of the development, because Charlie's skills doing low-level, very fast code, uncompromised fast, that came to full fruition here. The engine, we suddenly had an engine that could do audio natively, and computers became faster, and Charlie wrote the Vst Engine, made audio natively on the computer. He created the plugin interface, the Vst interface, and a new way was born to do audio on the computer. The plan was there to go to the Mac very early on. So as soon as Cubase came out, 1.0 was done, I started porting it to the Macintosh. And I got help from two guys living in London, Mark Badger and Josh. I forgot his last name. They were friends. And so we did Cubase on the Mac. And then I already had envisioned this move, and I created a framework that abstracted the operating system to a certain extent, but it wasn't perfect, unfortunately. So it created a lot of extra work. Still, we got it done. That was the point when I met Hans Zimmer, actually. He was blown away by Cubase, and because they had it at the NAMM show and they presented it on two large monitors, something you could do on the Macintosh, which we couldn't do on the Atari. But a whole new ballgame in terms of overview of your composition. After we've done that, we did the Windows version. Again, this framework that I did came in handy, but it created a lot of extra work still for going from one platform to the other. And so at the point when we decided we have to rewrite this mess was also created by going from this platform to this platform, not having source code control, and sending back and forth source files, merging them by hand, and so on. There was the plan to do this right this time, So Werner started with a new engine, and Michael, who later joined us, started working on this. But for my taste, it was the wrong approach, because we needed a foundation. We need this perfect framework, this layer that abstracts all the specifics of the operating system, so that the code that's written on top of this layer is perfect and just one source for all the platforms. Otherwise, it doesn't work. It just doesn't work. So that's was mid-90s. I said, okay, let me. I did some research. What frameworks are out there? It wasn't a completely new idea, and there were commercial frameworks, but none of them satisfied our needs. They were too big or focused on something else, didn't have the real-time controls that we needed. And so I started to develop our own framework. And that's how Nuendo started. I spent 2 years working from home at that point. There was tension in the team, and it was just better for me not to be at the office. And after 2 years, I already started writing a little bit of a program based on the framework, but it wasn't very far. So during that time, audio developed, and Cubase VST suddenly got a boost in the market. We were first with native audio, and there was a big push, and so the product became very viable again and important.
Okay, but before you go on, you had just taken us on a journey of how Nuendo was built. Nuendo was the end result of your determination to make a better and better and better framework. You couldn't find a commercial. You made your own.
Okay. I wanted to answer that question, actually. So the new development was sidelined, and we had to make a decision. What are we going to do with this now? And so we decided, let's see if we can enter the post-production market with a new product. And that's how the plan came to make Nuendo. Also to use the Nuendo development to improve the software to the point where it could actually replace Cubase. Because in this very early 1.0 version, people would have missed so many things.
In VST, you talked about the low-level stuff that was done, and then the VST plugins. The first plugins were done by Steinberg, right?
Yeah.
I remember there was a Moog, and then there was an LM4. Who did those plugins?
Charlie wrote the Vst Engine and the early plugins.
I mean, was there a decision early to allow this to be used by other people? Did you guys ever think of licensing it? Did you ever think of charging for it? I mean, what was that decision-making process to allow other people to just have access to the VST SDK and the spec?
How that process worked, I don't know much about. I know it was opened up. We had this DSP development company in our orbit, Hooper Digital Audio from Bremen. I think they did some plugins very early on. And one of the first were Native Instruments. Was a Prophet 5 emulation, I think it was. Am I right? Yeah.
Stefan Schmidt, yep.
Yeah.
Generator.
Yeah,
and then he had the Pro 5, yes?
It was, I never sensed doubt that it should be open to everyone.
But you could not have predicted that there would be tens of thousands, maybe hundreds of thousands of plugins in this format. I mean, it couldn't have crossed your mind. If somebody had told you guys back in 1995, 1996, there'll be tens of thousands of plugins in the VST format, what would you have thought?
No, we haven't foreseen this. And it's when you're so close in front of it, working on it, you don't think in these terms. That's where people like Steve Jobs come in, who are bold enough to envision a future and just look. I was at a presentation where Steve Jobs was talking, and what he said is, if you design a system now, you have to design it for the computers we have in 3 years, for instance. And sure, we could have looked, how would it look in 10 years if this development goes on? But what an interesting story is, very early during the Attire days, we had one of these large group meetings with our distributors, and we had the plan to do, we wanted complete total recall. So you can load your song and it sounds the same and you can continue working on it. That was just not possible during the MIDI days. There were attempts, some worked well, ours not so much. And we have that now. Now we have total recall. With everything in the box, you open your song and it sounds the same.
So Nuendo was developed by you pretty much by yourself, or, away from the team. You took a couple years off, worked from home, and now you bring it back to Steinberg. What is that like when they first see it? Can you remember?
I did the framework working from home, but when I started working on the actual application, I came back to the office. Meanwhile, we have moved to a bigger office in the Eifelstraße, and I built a team. I didn't write it by myself alone. There was a team. There was one guy who was very important in the whole development and was great help for me. That was Mario Ewald. He did an internship at Steinberg, and he worked on something, and somehow I discovered that he wrote excellent object-oriented C++ code, clearly structured, and I said, okay, I want to work with this guy. So we started to work together on Nuendo, and I gave him a complete brain dump on everything I knew at that point. What we did was we recreated all the technology that Steinberg had in Cubase, rewrote it in C++, object-oriented, in a cleaner, more readable, better structured way. And so I knew a lot of the code, and I had my ideas. And so Mario was the brilliant junior programmer who digested all the ideas. And what I wanted was I wanted to bring in computer scientists, people who studied computer science. We were all self-taught. Werner, Charlie, me, Stefan, we all learned on the job. Some did a more solid approach, some developed what they needed by themselves, but we had a limited tool set at hand, and I believed at that point that we need computer scientists for the more complex problems. What my contribution is, I can do these complicated things if I have to. I like to have experts by my side that help me with that, who are better prepared. And Mario was the first of these guys, actually. We hired a few more later on at Steinberg, but
so the framework is not Nuendo.
Right.
Nuendo
It's
is
layered.
built on the framework.
actually 3 layers. There's this lower level, which is basically an operating system, an abstract operating system. Then there's a toolbox which you can use to build applications. And then there's the actual application code. This way you can reuse the framework for other products, and you can also use the toolbox for other products, which we tried later on, but to some extent it was successful.
So, but now Steinberg has a sort of, they have an embarrassment of riches. You've got on one hand Cubase, which is Cubase VST now, which is doing very well in the market. And now you have this other thing, which could be sort of the successor of Cubase. What does Manfred, how do you guys do? Do you decide to have both? Do you combine them? How does that conversation happen?
It was a natural development. We reached a point with Nuendo where it was powerful enough to replace Cubase, given that it had some add-ons and a score editor. And on the other hand, Cubase VST version 5 came to a point where they couldn't add much more to it. And anything new would have come in the area of editing. Meanwhile, we knew that our editing sucked in Cubase VST, and so one of the focus was audio editing, and so we had very good audio editing in Nuendo, and we wanted to bring this into Cubase.
And that's where we get Cubase SX from, right?
Right, that was Cubase SX 1.0, and at that point, that was 1999, 2000, around, when that happened. The whole team came on the new code base, started messing with it, me getting grumpy, and other changes in the company on the management level made me frustrated with the whole thing.
At this time, Steinberg was trying to go on the Neue Mark, and what was the situation like inside of the company at that time? As much as you could tell us about that time.
It was exciting, of course. Suddenly there was a vision that all the because they created this program for the key people within Steinberg to participate in this. There was this notion of, okay, we might get rich on this. I went out and bought a Porsche, which I still have today. I'm happy I did, because I could enjoy it for 20 years now. It was a stupid idea at that point, but it felt good. It was changes in the company, because a public company has different requirements in terms of transparency. You have to document every step you do. You have to have clear management structures. Like there needs to be a hierarchy. I never felt part of the hierarchy. I mean, Manfred and Charlie were the people I talked to, and I did my work. And I hate being in hierarchies. I hate being at the top of the hierarchy and within. It's just not for me. And that's one of the things that drove me out of the company. It didn't happen. I mean, we didn't go public. The Neuer Markt, it collapsed. We had this end of the internet bubble in 2000, and so plan was buried. And Steinberg was in bad shape because of that, because it's a very costly thing to do all this auditing with these expensive companies, all the people you bring in.
Price Waterhouse Cooper and all these guys.
Right. And so Steinberg got this offer from Pinnacle to sell to them for 25 million Deutschmarks. It was a pretty large sum for Manfred and Charlie, but not for the rest of us. It was disappointing. We were talking about valuations of like 200 million at one point, and now they sold it off for 24. For me, it was bitter because I earned company shares by then through a deal on Cubase for Windows, which was very much in favor for me, and also for the new code I wrote. At some point I had sole ownership on it because they didn't pay me for it directly. I got royalties from Cubase, but I didn't get paid from them for Nuendo, for writing Nuendo. So there was no instructions. And so I had the intellectual property because of that. And so I had company shares, and so that deal wasn't very good for me. I mean, it was a big boost for me personally. I could buy a house and just level up my lifestyle, but I couldn't retire and be free. I always wanted to be free.
So this disappointment, it must have been very profound and sad for you. What did you do?
What I did? I mean, there was something else happening, and that's I started partying hard. And after 15 years in front of the computer, being divorced by then, confronted with having to reinvent my life, I started partying, and that actually had some effects on my work ethics and my mood when I was there in the week. And at some point I just couldn't stand it anymore. I had this deal, I had company shares that by now I had the money on the bank, and I had a contract that gave me license fees every month for 5 years, and I just had the decision: go there, get the money, be frustrated, or not go there and have a happy life and have the money. So, and that's what I decided. So I just tumbled out of it in the end. It wasn't beautiful. I had the time of my life on the bright side, but my work life just collapsed.
Now, were you thinking of maybe changing industries? Were you thinking of changing professions, getting out of programming completely at this time?
I got into music. I started producing music on Cubase. It was psytrance and electronic dance music, and I was confronted with the difficulties you have as a musician with Cubase when you want to do these things. I mean, there was so much missing, looking back. And I learned that because I couldn't change the program anymore. And previously it always went like, I got into a little tune or some loops I was working on, and then I saw something and said, no, this has to change. So I got into the code, and music was sideline again. Now I could only use Cubase as a user, and I had people around me who wanted to make music. So as a group, we created like 50 tracks together, and it was good. It was very good looking back. I mean, first, after 15 years in front of the computer, it was finally good to be among people. The way I work, I'm hard to myself when I'm into something, which is not good. I mean, your personality deteriorates. But I find it so exciting that I forget about it myself. And during that time, I could recover. I could truly recover and just get back to having a life, not just work. And I was faced with the shortcomings of Cubase. I suddenly understood what I didn't understand when I was working on it.
And so what did you decide to do about that? Did you decide to go back into some programming?
That was after a while, actually. When we did Nuendo, we hired a guy, composer, someone who started composing, who helped us with Nuendo for a while. And this guy ended up at Adobe in Hamburg. Sönke Schnepel was his name, right? And Sönke had the assignment to set up a team to write an audio program for Adobe. They had this, what's the name, the program that they still have?
Audition.
Right. Audition. It was a horrible code base, and so they brought me in as software architect. It was a large salary, like a welcome package of stock options and so on. And then I started working there, and I wasn't used to it anymore, and I wasn't the friendliest person, to be honest. But I also suffered largely in this environment. It's these hierarchies, so everybody is like picking on everyone to get up the ladder somehow. And that basically killed me there. It was like 4 months, and then I was out. And at that time, I kept close contact to Matthias Juvan. Matthias was a programmer who we hired at Steinberg. He came from Austria. He studied there computer science, and his thesis? No, his the thing he did for getting his degree was a little sequencer called Kristall, and he was Matthias is someone who's highly self-motivated. He's driven by his passion to create something, And Matthias started, while I was working at Steinberg, to rewrite Kristall, to create a new code base. And Matthias was exposed to a lot of the ideas. He had access to the Cubase code base, and I introduced him to the COM concept, COM interfaces. And COM was something coming from Microsoft, which allows you to overcome a problem in building modular programs with C++. And with this COM approach and the understanding that there needs to be perfect framework, he started a new code base. And when we kept close contact, and we kept loose contact. And then he was at a point where he wanted to work on this full time. And that was a time when I left Adobe, but I knew that I wanted to work again. And so this was perfect. And Matthias was Windows-based. I was a Mac programmer. I started working on the Windows side of this new framework. And pretty soon I was able to get finance. I did some phone calls. A former colleague from Steinberg, Paul Wishart, he put me in contact with PreSonus. PreSonus they wanted their own sequencer. They bundled Cubase with their hardware, and they paid like $250,000 in license fees to Steinberg every year. And what they got was very limited and couldn't barely utilize the hardware it was sold with. So they wanted something they own that they can bundle with their hardware and build up as an independent product. And so that's how that happened. So Paul Wishart set up a meeting with Jim Odom, my dear friend, and me at the NAMM show. And that was like 2005. And so we liked each other from the very beginning. And so I made a trip to Baton Rouge, Louisiana, and then we worked out a deal, and then we had financing. So that was the foundation for us to work on this new code base full-time on our own terms, and that was a blessing.
Now, so you're now looking at, this is almost like your third major platform. Now, have you recognized certain things that you would never do again, like some omissions that were in Cubase that you now could correct?
Actually, the situation was different now, because Matthias was the driving force. Matthias, because we had to have a common understanding how we solve conflict, and we split it up. He's the guy, he has the technical authority, and I have the authority on the user interface. So he has the last word with all the implementations, all the technical things, and I have the last word on the user interface. Should we not agree on something, which was rarely the case, actually. And Matthias, he's the same maniac as I am. If he is working on something and he's got his vision where he wants to go, he works on this non-stop. And This was the first time I had a peer that was like me. And so we were really a power team. And unfortunately, things went not in favor of the thing. But it was like this thing that now I had the chance to do it right. We were able to hire people. We could bring on Mike Oppermann, who was a computer scientist. He was the real computer scientist. He went to university, and brilliant mind, and humble person, friendly person. It was great. And then we brought in Eike Jonas, who did all the DSP work, all the stock plugins in Studio One from Eike. Things that are complex, like multiband compression and convolution, reverb, and a lot of good things. And so we had a very solid foundation in the beginning. And so I learned from Cubase what was wrong. I knew exactly what I need, what I want. I knew we had this company that's focused on recording gear. We have the people there that simply want to record. I mean, for them, it's just stems and mixing. For us, it's a lot more. So I want a browser. I want a preview player. I want a very fast preview player. I want to go like dang, 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 dang. Could build that. Excellent. And we want ease of use was my mission all along. So that was my mantra. And fortunately, we all had the same ambition. And so drag and drop.
The drag and drop. I was hoping you would say that. You know, the drag and drop in Studio One is just, it's remarkable.
Yeah, it's like a language in itself. You can do almost everything with style manipulation. And it saves you a lot of clicks, and it goes deep into, it's body learning what happens there. So it comes natural without thinking. Dun, 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 dun. Huh?
You've come out with Studio One. Are you ever self-conscious and worried that the world really doesn't need another DAW?
I knew it did, because all these programs have become so complicated that we lost people on the way. And so that was my first meeting with Jim Odom. He asked, okay, what would you do differently? I said, leave out features. Just drop features, first of all. Look at what do you really need. And make it so dead easy that people, that we have a wider audience. Don't cater for the expert power user who's proud to have learned something insanely complicated, unnecessarily complicated. That's not our audience. We want the recording musician, people who do music, who are musicians primarily. And that worked out well. It was like dead on. It was like Punktlandung, to the point, the reception. It was, it's so easy to use, and it sounds great. And all the things we wanted happened with it.
Tell me a little bit about the DSP and how it differs from DAW to DAW. Is there such a thing as, when you're dealing with digital audio and summing it into a stereo bus, is there such a thing as any artistic or creative way to do that, or all the DAWs technically sound the same? Is there a sound to any DAW?
We had to admit there is, but it was retrospective. We did the best we could do to have pristine audio. We started late with the development, so we could base it on high resolution floating point. There was in every CPU by then, and that helped. But it was also things like I can put in dithering in certain places, which makes a difference when you mix down or when you listen to it. We just did a few things right, and it happened that people recognized it and was sounding great. And then we went back and, okay, what could it be that it sounds better? Is there something to it, or is this just myth?
So by 2009, Studio One has really started to make some waves, and there are a lot of fans. How do you feel?
I'm proud of Studio One. It's the best piece I worked on. It's the one where I think things are right. I mean, I like to work with it myself. I had the great opportunity to start fresh with some brilliant programmers, and we had the freedom to do this in Hamburg over a period of 3 years. We were never pressured. When are you ready? When is it coming out? It's ready when it's ready. That's what Jim Moran said, and Jim Muck at that point. So it's great. I'm happy I had the opportunity. Unfortunately, things went into a different direction. PreSonus wanted to take more control. PreSonus wanted to move the control panel development for their hardware and for their mixers to the Hamburg team. And I didn't like that idea, because I knew that if we losing steam now, it's not good for Studio One. We still have a few things to do and to really be on top. By now they achieved it, I think. And I think they went beyond with some of the things they did. So things went into a different direction, and then the situation with Matthias became tense, and we had fights that weren't nice. And then PreSonus brought in a manager. I was managing director of the company at that point, developer and managing the company. They didn't understand that managing the company was only a small fraction of my work there. The actual work was programming, conceptual work. But they wanted to bring a manager and free me of these tasks. I think they thought that I'm not the right person to run the company. If it's growing into a direction where it's not just Studio One, but other products that are basically ordered. I agree, looking back. And it came to a situation where it was me or them, and so I took a step back and left the team.
that must have been pretty hard since you've been at the sort of conceptual groundwork of this amazing software and you've seen it grow.
On the one hand, it was that. On the other hand, I worked myself into the same. I think the same hole again for me. I worked 6 years nonstop, and I had a hunger for life, and that again affected my work, and it was okay. I needed a break, and so the company kept me on the payroll. I still worked on the server, the license server that I wrote, which was the e-commerce backbone. And that was until 2015, when the company was in very bad financial shape. They had made some wrong decisions. They thought they should enter the speaker market, and they lost their core business to other companies. Focusrite, for instance, took some of their interface sales. Behringer came out with digital mixing. It was just difficult, and so they had to let go people, and I was one of them. Of course, I still had my company shares because Matthias and I were co-owners in the joint venture that we set up by then, and so I was out on the street.
And then what happens?
Now
you're going to have a third beginning.
What happened? I remember this guy, Doug Rogers, who called me a year earlier. He wanted to convince me that that there's no future in PreSonus and that I should come work for him. At that point, it was a pretty bold statement. Me being co-owner and working on my own baby, that I should go work for him.
That does sound like, honestly,
software.
That sounds like Doug. It really does sound like Doug.
But okay, so I remembered this guy and I gave him a call. And so he offered me a large sum of money. And so 3 days later, I had a job and had no financial setbacks, and started to work with Doug and his team. He had this idea to create a subscription business, and they started to do some work on it, and so I reviewed what was there. There was a girl in Vietnam who worked on a downloader, but she wasn't an educated programmer, so it wasn't very useful. And they wanted to go with another copy protection company. I don't recall the name, but it was one of these commercial things that you use for CAD software and so on. And I worked with that a little bit. It didn't work out. And I said, this is a stupid idea. Let's go back and work with Pace on this. And so I brought Pace back in. And then I created it in 3 months, single-handedly, the subscription business for East West. I wrote the download program, the installation center in Java, and I developed the license server, which basically is the centerpiece that connects our e-commerce system with the Pace Central, with the Pace license server, and our download program. And that was done after 3 months.
And then what do you do? I'm sure Doug has more work for you.
Yeah, then I was back working on Play. And that was such a horrible code base. I just couldn't stand working on it. And I did some work on it. I put in the database browser that developed a content database, an SQLite database with all the libraries, all the instruments in there tagged. And I added that to play, but I hated the work in that environment. When I came on board, they were still on Visual Studio 2005, and it was 2015. And Visual Studio version 3 or so, because they just couldn't use the newer compilers, but because the code base won't compile on it. So they didn't have a source code control system. No, they had a source code control system, no wrong. What they didn't have was a continuous build server. That's something that we did at PreSonus very early on, that you have a server that builds your software as soon as someone checks a change into the source code control system. So there was this guy, Klaus, he was doing the builds. He would send it to Truk, who was in Vietnam, working on computers that were in the office in Los Angeles at the studio, working remotely, and just insane environment. So I modernized the code base. I made it compatible with the newest compilers, and then I set up a continuous build system, and so we suddenly had builds automatically. And but it also became clear to me while doing this work that this code base has no future. You couldn't do anything creative with it. So I started from scratch on a new engine by basically translating the good things in Play into a new, cleaner environment. This program is called Opus. It just recently came out. It's based on Juice, but not Juice exclusively. I didn't like some of the things that were done in Juice and how they were done. Juice did some things I didn't like, so I did a framework that the engine is built on, and it has some very nice things like meta classes and meta properties, which makes it very easy to do certain things you always have to do when you have these systems, like serializing the information into text files, into JSON files in this case. And so I did that. I worked on this on the side and basically started in 2015, 16. Then I intensified this a little bit, and I got doubt that we were able to do this, actually, me alone. And so I was almost giving up when Eike, who meanwhile I hired at East West, Eike, I used to work at Steinberg. We worked together at Steinberg, then at PreSonus. Then he went to Native Instruments. I went somewhere else, and then at East West, I hired him again. And
You're talking about Ike Jonas.
Right, still working with me. And so Eike, I was almost on the way out. Eike made a phone call to Wolfgang Schneider. Wolfgang Schneider, he's the author of Contact, He created Contact, the beginnings. Wolfgang created the Contact script language. It's just defining a lot of what Contact is today. And Wolfgang was available and he was very interested. Having left Native Instruments by then, he did some work for a company outside our industry, and he really was interested in this opportunity to get back into something he knows very well. And he suggested to create our own script language. And of course he had this idea in his head long before, I guess. And so we joined forces, and that was the point when I said, okay, with Wolfgang on the team, there's hope. And so I made another contract with Doug, and so then we had this team. Eike, Wolfgang, me, and Klaus. Klaus was the only other programmer left from the play team, and Klaus is he knows that old code base inside out. So, and so
that's a kind of a dream team.
Yeah.
At East West.
In a way, yes. And I really liked the work. I liked the code base and the things we came up with, and the things we could do for the user. It's things like take for granted these days, but user assignable key switches or articulations that you can freely map and so on. And a real mixer with an effects rack with lots of effects that Ike created. A scripting language, a powerful scripting language with debugging inside the software, something that Contact doesn't have. They have an external program, the Creators Tools. They finally managed to get some debugging going for their scripting engine. But it's all inside the program. That's the part that's not visible yet.
You just described what I really think is a dream team. You also talked about other people that have created products in this area, everything from Notator to Contact. Why do you think so much software is programmed by German people?
That's an interesting question. I don't really know the answer, but if you look at the inventions that come from Germany, composers, classical composers that come from Germany. There's just a high level of education about these things, possibly.
The other evenly more bizarre idea is when you look at the two of the major DAWs in the world, Cubase, Logic. These come out of not just Germany, they come out of Hamburg. Why Hamburg?
Why Hamburg? I don't know. That's just the ecosystem. It's it happened. It all started at M-Town. M-Town was a large music store in Hamburg, multi-department, just full of keyboards and guitars, drums, everything. Huge. And Manfred used to work there as a sales guy. C-Lab was founded by Burkhard Bürgerhoff, one of the founders of M-Town, one of the owners, one of the three owners. C-Lab had their offices in the backyard, basically, of M-Town, on the property. And I mean, Charlie was always very generous spreading his knowledge. When Gerd Lengeling we had this situation. There were two DX7 editors, one by Jason Stokes and one by Gerd Lengeling. And Steinberg had to decide which to take on. And they stupidly decided for Jason Stokes' editor because they liked the guy better and thought he's better for the team.
something they'll regret.
That's the exception. And so Gerhard, he went to Burkhard Bürgerhoff, M-Town, and said, "What should I do with it?" Okay, yeah, we can try to sell it, but you really make money with a sequencer. So can you make a sequencer? That's the story I heard. So Gerhard started to gather knowledge, and Charlie was generous enough to share his expertise with him. And so just were very open. At Steinberg, we always try to be the good guys, the friendly guys. And so we're always open to new people and meet people and talk. One of the things I learned from Manfred is just keep talking to people, even if it's a competition or you don't, just keep an open conversation.
That's amazing, because you look at VST, I mean, Steinberg opened that up. ASIO, Steinberg opened that up.
Ambros was from the very beginning meant to be open. Unfortunately, C-Lab decided, no, we need our own, because marketing started to mess with it. It's always bad if marketing starts messing with APIs and starts a battle. It's not good for the industry.
So Wolfgang, you're kind of like you're kind of really your own man. You live by what you feel. You're not afraid to walk away. How do you think that sort of character has sort of shaped what you've been able to create?
I was lucky to be with people that allowed me to just follow my vision. Manfred and Charlie were always supportive, and they never really tried to push me into a different direction. They supported me, they gave me the tools, they allowed me to make decisions on who we hire, when I travel to London, and when I meet people, it was always their support. Also bringing me in contact with people, like the whole environment was friendly in that respect, and it's important. It was important always for me to talk to users, because me not being an audio engineer or composer or even a musician, I was dependent on other people, and because I do this, what I do for other people, I don't do it for myself. It was one of the missions very early on. I need to get out to people and talk to people who actually use it. And I was in this environment, they brought me in touch with Stock Aitken Waterman and with Stevie. and Stevie Wonder and Hans Zimmer, which were all very good relationships, or Rob Abatier. One of my best friends I met through this, Steve Touchard. And that continued later on at PreSonus. Jim Odom just put me in touch with people. They brought us into the studio. They set up a recording session for us to demo the workflow. And I never got instructions and just discussions, of course.
But you also seem like you have an incredible sort of ability. You seem to have an incredible ability to really focus on a task and almost get too deep into it. Do you think that's been helpful in achieving some of these things that you've done in such a fast time? Your work ethic?
The thing with programming is you develop a picture in your mind how things interact, and you have to get it out and implement it. And these buildings tend to be very complex, and the more you live in it, the better you can orient yourself, and the more you know, okay, when I do this, then this happens, this happens, this happens. And the more you live in this world, the faster you get, basically. And that's exciting. It's really exciting because you get things done, and it's a rush.
Of course, today, a lot of people who want to make VST plugins or who want to get into programming, the tools are so much better. But I want you to speak directly to them who are watching this right now. What kind of advice would you give aspiring young people who want to get into this life, this programming? What would you say to them right now?
Don't be let down by doubt. I never had doubt I really had doubt I'm able to do what I want to do. And just be persistent. Learning takes time, and results come with time. And then just do things with passion, because if passion drives you, it's effortlessly. If it excites you, if it's fun, you just have more power to concentrate. And then keep learning. There's a lot of things that are of interest for this kind of work that don't seem related. Object-oriented programming is actually working, and it's important. And object-oriented programming is about the big picture. It's about allowing you to express the core ideas purely. If you write code that's just function on function on function, you lose the big picture. And so object-oriented programming is important, so learn that well.
Now, the last thing I want to ask is, what kind of advice would you give them to sort of maintain a sort of a realm of real life and resist the sort of draw or lure, and I guess this will be personality based, to just get too deep into the actual coding process? What suggestions, what advice would you give to sort of, or is there any value in maintaining some kind of a balance between a sort of a real life and that programmer's life? Because we know the programmer's life can be very solitary.
For me, it's in phases. Right now, I have a phase where we released Opus. Version 1.02 is out, so the first, all the major bugs are fixed that we know of, and now I can take a step back and relax. And so it might become intense for a few months at a time, but then there will be other times. You do have to get out at some point.
From where you started, Wolfgang, now that you look back and the life you've had, how do you feel? You must feel a lot of satisfaction. I mean, you've really had an impact in the world of music creation on computers, and you know most of the music today is created on computers. How do you feel? I mean, what do you think?
I feel relaxed, self-confident. I'm free. I sold my company shares in PreSonus last year. I achieved what I always wanted, and that's freedom, actually. For me, things are in the future, looking forward, looking back. That's rare. Other people do that for me.
So I just want to thank you for taking the time today. It's been a long interview, and you've been very open and willing to share your life experiences. Again, I want to reiterate, I'm a bit of a fanboy of yours. I think you're very humble, and I think that's a great quality. But I want you to really understand that your impact it goes all the way back to the parts in Cubase and the Toolbox. Every single DAW uses that paradigm.
Do you remember when we were walking down the aisle at the NAMM show?
Yes.
I left Steinberg by that, haven't started with PreSonus yet, and you were getting at me, when are you coming back? This industry needs you. When are you coming back?
I remember saying this to you. I remember telling you no. You were telling me something about an internet company, and I said, no. You're not going. You have to come back. You have to contribute to this industry because we need you. And I was serious. And you probably listened to me. I don't know.
Yeah, in a way. I mean, I never forgot this conversation. I knew that, okay, maybe it's my mission.
Well, I'm glad I have a little bit of a footnote in your life. Again, thank you so much. You have yourself a pleasant rest of the day over there. I think the weather is very nice today, so maybe you can catch a little bit of sun for the rest of the day. But thank you so much for your time, my friend.
Thank you for the opportunity. It went much better than I thought. So
I knew it would be good because we're brothers.
Yes,
we're definitely brothers.
very much.
All right, thank you.